Mark Sage, please come on the stage and just take your presentation, and we are looking forward to hear what you are presenting us.
Fantastic. Can you hear me? Funny you should say that. I was just about to mention the Coldplay concert as well. I thought it was just for me. So, as you can probably hear, I'm from England. It's great to be traveling again, and I really hope you get some benefit from my talk, but also really the important part is that interaction. Let's ask questions. Let's really dive into the detail of this technology. And we seem to be at the very end of it, the presentation. We'll just swap that. Can we put it at the start, please? So as I said, my name is Mark Sage. I'm the Executive Director of the area, which stands for AR Enterprise Alliance. Sorry guys, I might be telling you some to suck eggs here and things like that, but I just wanted to be very clear where augmented reality is in this continuum that I use quite a bit. Okay, so we all live in the real environment. People, and I know there's lots of people here, I've already spoken to a few that are working very much in the virtual reality environments, or virtual reality. Where I focus is in the augmented reality, so putting digital content on top of the real world, and only in the enterprise space, okay? So I mentioned that just to make sure that everybody is really clear. So what are the benefits of augmented reality in the enterprise space? Okay, well, it's about getting the most relevant, conceptual, and needed information to the worker when they need it. Okay, so getting that relevant data. Also, we've seen with, unfortunately, the COVID pandemic, being able to speak to anybody and get things fixed. So actually managing your resources across the organization. We call it the use case of remote assistance. So that's been a big input at the moment with the COVID part. But also we're seeing more and more use cases around real-time compliance. Being able to complete a task, and that's actually being the compliance, it's going through a compliance test. And rather at the moment, what I see in lots of organizations is someone has to come up and check that the work's been done correctly. Well, you're able to do that with augmented reality, and that's then stored and can be brought back at any time in the future. Okay, some very high level kind of improvement of performances. But what does it really mean for organizations? Well, it's all about saving money. It's about improving efficiencies. It's taking less time to do tasks. It's about minimizing those errors, and about reducing and lowering costs. Hey, and who wouldn't want to do that in their organization at the moment? It's a really important area that we not only make money, but save money. So you go, okay, Mark, well, that all sounds okay, it's very high level, but are companies actually making savings? And the answer is yes, and quite substantial savings. Here's just a small splattering of organizations that have allowed us to look at our ROI, or the return on investment. There are a bunch of different use cases here, and one of the things that we're working on very hard within the area is to define these different use cases. But anything from a massive saving of 96% in inspection, the Newport News shipbuilding make those big aircraft carriers that some of you may have watched the new Top Gun film. Well, when those aircraft carriers land, that's what Newport News shipbuilding make. So a huge reduction in time to be able to literally using a tablet, a piece of work should have been done, they use the tablet to make sure that it's in the right place and inspect the work that's been done. We talked about on-site repairs or remote assistance. Again, smaller levels, but 11% savings. All of these are actual companies making savings now, and one of the things I'd love to talk to you more about are other companies and the kind of savings that they're making. Because as we all know, to be able to get this technology into organizations, you have to have a clear ROI, return on investment. So just a little bit about the area to give you a bit of context of why I've been working on this for a while. As you can see, it's a global membership-funded, not-for-profit alliance. We only focus on the enterprise AR space, but that's not to say many of our members are working in virtual reality as well. Our membership looks like this. It's in kind of 3 groups. What's really important is the company is actually deploying the technology, and we're seeing more and more companies want to come into the area to kind of develop that understanding and build those partnerships. Obviously, from a provider perspective, there's both hardware and software companies. I know we have our friends here at View AR, which will be demonstrating outside as well. But these companies are throughout the world. And then the third group are kind of a combination of non-commercial organizations, government agencies, research institutes, universities, and standards organizations. What we're really doing is in building, a bit like today, that environment where you can learn from each other to develop those best practices and help you successfully deploy the technology. And that's really the kind of 4 key pillars, and hopefully this resonates with lots of you. The first one is about creating that thought leadership, the kind of information that business decision makers need. And I boil that down to 4 simple things. Business leaders want to understand what problems can be solved using AI. They want to see actual companies deploying the technology, so the kind of case studies. They obviously want to understand the technology themselves, but the most important thing is the return on investment. And I'll come back to that because we're doing lots of work of helping companies have models and information to develop that return on investment. The second stage is, or the second part is about networking, as I mentioned, sharing experiences, building knowledge, learning from each other. The third one is around the educate side. There is a huge, unfortunate skills gap in our industry. Seeing lots of people moving from one organization to the other. So we're working really hard with any educational organizations or universities to upskill the next set of workers, helping them by doing guest lecturing, organizing out placements, setting them challenges, anything we can do to bring more people into the enterprise AR ecosystem. And then finally, and probably where most of the work and where I want to kind of go into next is about reducing the barriers to adoption. We use a term called pilot purgatory. Around the world, there's lots of little pilots. You know, a couple of people have bought a couple of devices, done a little bit of software testing. You know, it's a really cool demo, but that's not turning into full deployment. And that's one of the biggest challenges we need to kind of crack around the world. So what are we doing about that? Well, we found that there's some kind of key barriers that every company seems to come up with or to experience. So what we've created is committees, opportunities to come together to really dive into the detail about those challenges, to work together to try and overcome them. So things like security, it's often forgotten about or not thought about when you actually deploy AI, but comes to bite them in the backside when you're actually trying to deploy it across the organization. Safety, you know, you're now walking with something which is distracting your attention. Requirements, just to touch on the requirements committee, one of the challenges we see is that companies often don't know where to start. You know, they say, well, this AI technology is great, but our processes mandate we have to do some sort of RFP or RFI, or we have to go through a certain purchasing process. So what we're doing is actually creating a set of global requirements, both from a hardware and software perspective. And then anybody will be able to download it and, of course, adapt them to their own needs, but having something to help the ecosystem. It also allows the providers to match their kind of product roadmaps to the requirements as well. So it's okay from the use case level, we've done lots of work on that, but it's really the low level stuff, the nitty gritty, and that's where the area really focuses on getting into that low level stuff. Our committees are developing lots of content as well as those discussions. So here's a couple of simple ones, just infographics, one about safety, one about security. But often when you go into a new organization, people don't know these challenges, so they're a great way of having a conversation and being able to discuss what the potential challenges are and the benefits as well. So certainly in the safety committee, the green stuff is about some of the benefits that you can get from wearable AR technology. I don't know why it does that, but a playbook. So another thing we've done, and again, safety is an area that doesn't often become a problem until you start to try and deploy it within your organization. So we created a template which has a bunch of techniques, tools, processes that allows safety managers to consider what they need to do before AR is deployed, whilst people are using it, and afterwards as well. So this is just a snippet of a kind of a process within it. But this is, again, freely downloadable from the area website. You know, please, I can share some links and things like that, but it's all there waiting for you guys to be able to use it. The other thing we have is a research capability. So every 6 months we say to all the area members, hey, what do you need to research? What information would be really useful for you? All the area members can make a little proposal, just as literally an online thing. We then have a session where they explain what the research is, and then finally all the members get to vote. So what we're building is a real kind of portfolio of information that's really critical to organizations trying to deploy or delivering AI. So I'm just going to run through some of these real quick. So the first one was about security in wearables. I've mentioned it a few times, and we actually have a security committee. We're now building on top of this for things like zero trust and a security maturity model, which I always struggle to say, so I've done all right there. The second one is the ROI calculator itself. Now we've made this available to everybody, so please, and again, when we get to more of the Q&A, I can explain that a bit more detail. It's not easy. You have to really measure what you do with your processes now, and then measure what you do with your processes whilst you're using AR, and obviously put the costs in and things like that. But it's critical if you want to get more investment within your company. You need to be able to show the return on investment. The third one was about what I call safety and human factors. So it's basically the gotcha. I don't know if that translates that well, but the gotcha research. It's a bunch of questions that you should be asking as you're trying to deploy this technology. So give you some examples, things like if you're working in a bright environment, that may impact the hardware choice. Noisy environment, there's a whole bunch of other questions in there. So it's a really useful piece of research that allows companies and providers to make sure that they have a clear solution before they dive into paying money and starting to deploy. The fourth one, barriers to adoption. This was actually, the research was completed by a university in Munich. And after quite a lot of work, they focused on the worker acceptance, often overlooked, and again, another great topic of conversation. You can't just do an AR solution and give it to the workers and say, hey, get on with it. Okay, you really need to work with them from start to finish. So there's lots of interesting input there. The area is about solving business problems, so a combination of technologies, IoT, AI, and AR, bringing that together. So there's a piece of research there. Web AR for the more technical nature bit, but is there a way that we can develop once and deploy over multiple devices independent on what the technology platform is? Another really useful one is taking big 3D assets that companies have, be it CAD models, BIM diagrams, point clouds. Often they're too big to get onto your AR devices. So we took 10 models, used 6 different tool chains, and reduced the size to deliver on 4 different devices, including the HoloLens and iPads and things like that. So it gives you a really good idea of what can and can't be done. Find AR, it's basically a search engine. We've scraped all the published research databases that have anything to do with enterprise AR, and now the area members can easily use the search engine, go and find the information they want. But it's also allowed us to identify what's missing as well. So we've now got a big, what we call the research agenda of missing pieces of content and research that would really help the ecosystem. And then the old chestnut 5G and AR. Gosh, if I had a biscuit for every time I was asked that question, I'll be a very full man. So, a big piece of research on what it is, how it's going to benefit the ecosystem, and more importantly, what needs to happen and what's actually happening around the world. So there's a whole bunch of case studies in there. And there's just a couple in development to whet your appetite, but one about mapping. I'm a big fan of layering AR use cases. So a lot of companies start with one. Can you get a cost of ownership for that? Well, possibly, but if you layer more and more solutions on top of it, suddenly that cost of ownership comes down, and the bean counters get happier and happier. And then finally, there's lots of work being done, step-by-step instructions. But what happens if you're doing something which is very dexterous? If you have to, if you're putting a screw into a hole, you can kind of measure that quite easily with AR. But if you need to smooth things around, if you need to use your hands a little bit more, AR becomes a little bit more difficult. So we're doing some research on that. So hopefully, guys, it gives you an idea. There's a real depth of knowledge and research that we're working on. The other way we're trying to deliver this is through our, and I came up with this term, so I'm ever so proud of it, work in ours, work in AR. Okay, it's trademarked, so no one can have it. But so basically 3 key themes. The one is about helping companies develop a business track and helping providers explain what the business benefits are. The second one is about the deployment track, so some of the barriers to adoption that I've mentioned, and then obviously ways to deliver kind of your master classes and thought leadership and things like that. So I'm, again, a big fan of this type of event where you get an opportunity to kind of ask questions, discuss things, really get into the detail, because I know, having worked in this space for a long time, the devil is in the detail. And to successfully deploy it, you can understand some of the challenges and benefits. I think that's me. I'm really looking forward to having conversations. Please come and grab me, ask any questions. I'd love to speak with you more, and thank you very much for the opportunity.